And Wisconsin lies at the heart of several biotic tension zones. There is the Alleghanian or Eastern, we've got our Eastern wood peewees versus Western wood peewees and wood thrushes and red-eyed vireos, Eastern birds. But the living, breathing reality is rooted squarely between Northern and Southern bird populations. So what we have is in the north of Wisconsin, biotic communities that are dominated by plants that like a northern climate. And in the southern part of the state, we have plants that like the climate in Illinois and the soils in Illinois. But in between, the tension zone is a mix of the two. And where I live, Eau Claire, you see it on the west side of the state, is in the middle of that. And this tension zone winds through the center of the state through Wood and Portage and Waupaca counties, all the way down to Milwaukee. And this is very important in how our biology shapes up here in the state, because we get not only willow flycatchers, but elder flycatchers. And we get not only wood thrush, but hermit thrush that breed here. And we get not only blue-winged warblers, but golden-winged warblers that nest here in the state between these two zones. And sometimes, like here in Eau Claire, in the same property, we have both of these northern and southern species taking up residence. So let's get back to those maps. It takes about 6.5 hours to drive from Kenosha in the extreme southeast to Superior in the extreme northwest of the state. Tonight, I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour of a baker's dozen of great birding locations, which I've picked out for their diverse mix of avian attractions. Nearly 400 species in all have been spotted in the places that I'm going to mention tonight. We're going to stop at the Northern Kettle Moraine State Forest, north of Milwaukee. I'm going to talk about Horicon National Wildlife Refuge, south of Lake Winnebago. The Arlington Prairie, north of Madison. Wyalusing State Park, in the far southwest corner of the state. What I call the Scoter Coast on Lake Michigan shoreline. Bay Beach Sanctuary in Green Bay. This is Kirtland's Warbler Country in Adams County. Necedah National Wildlife Refuge in Juneau County. Buena Vista Marsh in south of Stevens Point near Bancroft, Wisconsin. Museum in Wausau. Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge north of La Crosse. Creeks Meadows way up in the northwest in Burnett County. And Wisconsin Point just outside of Superior. All in 45 minutes, so hang on to your hats. This is an actual photo I took outside of Hudson, just after one crosses over from Minnesota on I-94. I have seen all of these species in Wisconsin, but two. The black vulture way up at the top, and the western grebe way down in the bottom left-hand corner. Great place to bird. I started birding at the age of 11 in Racine, Wisconsin, one of Milwaukee's suburbs, or Chicago's, I guess, if you care to state it that way. This is me in juvenile plumage. And here I am in adult plumage in Costa Rica, not Wisconsin. Very happy because there's a quetzal feeding in the avocado trees behind me. I am a professional journalist and a professional ornithologist, both. I have a degree in biology and I do science work. I was a career journalist as well. I wrote this guide, Where to Find Birds in Wisconsin, back in 2008. I have since sold the rights to it, but you can still buy the electronic version of the book on Amazon. I am currently, as Glenn said, the content editor for the classic book, Wisconsin's Favorite Bird Haunts, which is being transferred from print to online. When we're done, we will have about 1,000 sites online, and we hope to be one of the best online resources for bird finding in the US, because we're borrowing ideas from other places that have already done it. We're trying to perfect it. This is an example of one. This is one of the places we'll talk about tonight, the Buena Vista grasslands, marshland. And this is an example of how the website looks. It lists some of the birds, habitat, how to get there, some other information about it. So no matter the season, lots of birds to see. You'll always find something to like. And that's a lot of birds to juggle, a lot of area to juggle, a lot of square miles to juggle. But I picked these 13 sites tonight because they are the best of the best. Lots of birds, and they're user friendly as well, which is important to me. I suppose it's important to you too. We start with Kettle Moraine North Unit. This is in Sheboygan County, western Sheboygan County, north of Milwaukee. You remember Curtis's tension zone? I want to direct you back to that. If you look on the right side of Wisconsin, southeast of the lake, Winnebago, you'll see a number 12 on the map. That's Kettle Moraine. It's in the tension zone. And the reason that makes this significant is because there's a very diverse group of birds that can be found in this. What makes this area so attractive? You get forest birds, you get grassland birds, and you get some of each. Now, there is a northern and a southern unit of Kettle Moraine State Forest. The south unit is in Walworth County, which is much closer to you, and that's a great place to bird too, but I'm talking about the north here. The north has things like alder flycatcher and pileated woodpecker and Acadian flycatchers, veeries, red-breasted nuthatches, Henslow's sparrows, grasshopper sparrows, northern water thrush, lots of interesting warblers, pine warblers, cerulean warblers, Canada warblers that breed that far south. Of course, it's a tension zone, so that means the vegetation is somewhat northerly. Black-throated green warblers and hooded warblers, did I mention those? So it's a great spot for a lot of birds. One of the best way to see the birds in the North Kettle Moraine is to camp there. Milwaukee Lake is a great campground to do that. And that's true of a lot of these places. You can camp in and immerse yourself in these spots to get the best of the birds. Everybody's heard of Horicon National Wildlife Refuge. It's the second best place to bird in Wisconsin by most regards. Again, because it's incredibly diverse. Species like redhead duck, common gallinule, American white pelican, black-crowned night heron, trumpeter swan, least and American bitterns, yellow-headed blackbirds are pretty regular there, and things like short-eared owls often can find cattle egrets. In fact, some of these places that I'm talking about tonight, including Horicon and North Kettle Moraine, it's possible to see 100 species of birds in a day at some of the spots I'm talking about. Many of them, in fact, are that rich in bird species. And I've done this. I've seen 100 species of birds by spending a day in the place, starting out early and then keep on going. One of the finest points of Horicon is its shorebirding access. It is probably the most dependable shore birding spot in the state of Wisconsin because the water is managed. Black-necked stilts breed there now, and that's true for I think 10 years now. So, but you can find just about any kind of shorebird that you like at Horicon in the water that's drawn down. I'm listing on here the distance from Waukegan. When I show these distances, it's 116 miles, a 2-hour drive from Waukegan. When you bird, most of the birding, the shore birding in particular, is done from Highway 49. I call it Hood Ornament 49 because the traffic there speeds by at speeds of up to 60 miles an hour. So be careful when you bird it. There's a lot of semi-traffic. You have to get way off the shoulder, and you still have the doors blown off your vehicle anyways. The Arlington Prairie is a series of wetlands and grasslands, an egg country that's north of Madison, very near Madison, near the towns of Lodi and Arlington. And it includes the Shaneberg Marsh and Goose Pond Sanctuary, as well as some notable ponds and fields that are flooded seasonally. I think of it as a quick hitter because it's so close to the interstate. It's a jump off in 5 minutes, you're at Goose Pond, and you can stop in and see it. The best time to visit is now, late March, early April, when the waterfowl are bunching up. They're at the end of this now, but there are still some white-fronted geese, snow geese, trumpeter swans, and tundra swans that have been passing through. That's when it's at its best. Wyalusing State Park is at the confluence of the Wisconsin and Mississippi rivers. It's a beautiful place. This is a view overlooking that confluence, high above the rivers. This is a park that is great for a lot of warbler species. Now, to you in Illinois, maybe cerulean warblers aren't a big deal, but this is one of the best places in Wisconsin to see cerulean warblers, as well as Bathonotary. Kentucky, which again is much more common in southern Illinois than it is in southern Wisconsin. And Acadian flycatchers, which is a hard bird to find in a lot of places in Wisconsin. As well as some other big woods birds like pileated woodpecker, a lot of cuckoos, and a lot of grassland sparrows around the area of the park. It's another view overlooking the rivers. Best time to visit this place is actually in the first couple weeks of June. And the reason I say that is because the birds are still singing and they're still going strong in that first week of June. And so you don't need to rush this place. You can spend your time birding other places in Wisconsin, for example. Migratory warblers are a bigger priority to me in May. So I usually wait till June to hit Wyalusing. And yes, the vegetation is out, but it is in May too in this southerly location. You can't catch a break with that. So it's a good time to go. The Scoter Coast is what I call the region between Port Washington, Wisconsin on Lake Michigan and Two Rivers, Wisconsin, north. This is a stretch of about 65 miles of shoreline. This is Sheboygan you see in this aerial view. I call it the Scoter Coast because it's good for ducks. This is Two Rivers Harbor, another good birding locale. The middle ground of this is about 2 hours, 20 minutes north of Waukegan. As I said, 65 miles of the 200 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline constitute this part. And you can drive oftentimes at very close access along the bluff tops. There are a couple beaches and city accesses, but the harbors are the center focus for these great birding spots. We stop in Port Washington. Harrington Beach State Park has a nice lookout for that. That's just north of Port Washington in Ozaukee County. And Sheboygan, Manitowoc, and Two Rivers all have great birding in their harbor areas. There's also beach. This is Point Beach State Forest, which is a fantastic place just north, just outside of Two Rivers. And the Manitowoc Impoundment is a very, very popular and famous place for birds and rarities. I mean, this is a place where you not only see the scoters, but Manitowoc and a lot of these spots, you see long-tailed ducks, as well as every other duck species. A lot of gulls. This is a great blackback gull, is a good species to find at Point Beach and Two Rivers, and sometimes Sheboygan. Not often farther south than that. Little gulls are an unusual species that shows up regularly in Manitowoc in the impoundment there. Very odd occurrence. And red-throated loons are common throughout this coastline, this lakeshore. This is a great spot to see them at any of these points I talked about. Harrington Beach, off of Cleveland, that's a town between Manitowoc and Sheboygan. And whimbrels show up regularly in Manitowoc in the impoundment around the third week of May. I would say May 20th is a great date for whimbrels at this point. And it's one of the only places you can regularly see whimbrels in the state of Wisconsin migrating north, especially on the rocks of the impoundment. Bay Beach Sanctuary in Green Bay is one of my favorite spots of all because it's so user-friendly. It's actually managed by bird people. The park is designed for birders. It's got great trails. It's got a feeder system. It's got a purple martin colony. It's got wetlands and forest. It caters to all the folks. And so this is 2 hours, 38 minutes north of you. For me, it's farther than that. It's about 3.5 hours from Eau Claire, but I go there every year around the second to third week of May. You can depend on the fact that around the second week of May, the birds that fly up, the migrant birds that come up the shoreline, the Lake Michigan shoreline, will accumulate at Bay Beach, and you'll have a day when there are 26 species of warblers at Bay Beach, and it's reported 90 species of birds. And that will be just about every kind of warbler you can expect in Wisconsin, as well as olive-sided flycatchers and Philadelphia vireos and black-crowned night herons and other oddities. So, great spot for warblers in the state in migration, and especially at that time of year. Map of the place. Easy to walk around, park at one end, and then walk in. I'm going to talk about Kirtland's warblers just because they are so special. You know that years ago, they were pretty much isolated to Mayo, Michigan, the central part of Michigan, and they were declining due to cowbird predation. And since the cowbirds have been trapped and killed, they've increased by tenfold. The population has spilled over in Wisconsin and Ontario, and so now we have breeding Kirtland's warblers in Wisconsin at various points like Bayfield County, Marinette County, Jackson County, and most of all in Adams County. You know their song? You should. That's the way to find them. It goes wit, 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 wit. It's a very strong, loud warbler song, which is an odd sound. But if you know their song, you can locate them, and that is in the jack pines. They like young jack pines. They get too old. They don't like them. They're too small. They don't like them. They're about 15, 20 feet tall. And usually that means plantations. And wherever you find jack pine plantations of that height and age, that's a good habitat for them, and you can start your search. I'm being a little bit coy when I say this, but the best thing to do is to start in the middle of Adams County at the intersection of 15th Avenue and Beaver Avenue. And because I say that because that's the center of the paper company plantations and the jack pine plantations in the area. You are not allowed to go onto plantation property, onto the paper plantation properties. Really, the best way to see these birds is to sign up for a Wisconsin Society for Ornithology tour every spring. That a busload will take you in and take you on a tour, and that's the best way to do it. The other way to find these birds is to drive the roads early in the morning and listen for their song and hope that you can see one from the road. And that I've been successful with multiple times. You hear them and you can see them. If you can hear them, you can often see them from the road. Doesn't always work, but it's the best opportunity you have unless you stumble across one, and that's very hard to do. Hopefully that bird will be more and more common as we've managed for them. Necedah Wildlife Refuge is not as good a birding place as Horicon and Trempealeau, the other place I'll talk about. And that's because Necedah is big and sprawling and the habitat is not as diverse. It has wetlands, but the wetlands are big open ponds, and they're rather sterile compared to some other places. And the forest is not as diverse. It's a mixed coniferous forest, but it's sprawling. And so before the introduction of the whooping crane, Necedah was not my favorite place. It was a place where you might drop by to see if you had a chance at a golden eagle in winter. There might be some waterfowl, and you might see some turkeys and red-headed woodpeckers and things, and waterfowl. But it was not a rich habitat because you had to travel a lot of miles throughout a refuge to see it. And most of the best habitat is closed to the public. It's not open. Horicon, you can get into the best habitat. Trempealeau, you can get into the best habitat. Not the case with Necedah. It's all closed off to scientific study. Now, they do have a better access system now since the cranes have been introduced. There's a nature center that's been built, and they have a great hiking trail that goes out into the marsh. But the best way to see them is on a tower, a short distance from the visitor center. You can get up to the top of the 3-story tower, and you can often see the white birds standing out on the edges of the wetlands. We are, of course, talking about the eastern migratory flock. They used to have the ultralights guide them down to Florida. They've stopped that. They've discontinued that. But we still have the birds that come back and nest here. They have not always been successful. We have had problems with black fly infestations that bother the young, hindered the growth of the population, but they are stable, we believe. You can see them anywhere in the state. In fact, you can see them flying over Lake County if you're lucky. The females tend to wander. The males hang tight to where they were born. The females wander more. I've seen them other places in the state. I've seen them flying as I've driven down the interstate. So I mean, you can spot them. It's just a very rare occurrence. The Buena Vista Marsh, or grassland, is south of Stevens Point and the town of Plover. It's nearest the town of Bancroft on Highway 51, 3951. It is a very expansive agricultural and grassland mix. It's famous for birds like upland sandpiper, brewer's blackbird, Henslow's sparrow, clay-colored sparrow, grasshopper sparrow, western meadowlark, but most of all for the greater prairie chicken. In fact, it is my recommendation that if you want a singular Wisconsin experience, you should visit a blind. They are sponsored by the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. You can actually reserve a blind, and while you're in the blind, you will record the number of birds you see and keep track of that, part of a citizen science effort. The birds will perform on their leks right outside the blind. I've done this 3 times, but this is something that you can't see everywhere. These and sharp-tailed grouse are declining in Wisconsin. They may not be here forever. Introduction of new genes has not helped. The birds are still dropping out, despite the fact that we maintain the Buena Vista Marsh and grasslands. They have an isolated gene pool. It's just not doing very well. It hasn't been doing well since humans dug up the prairie. They've been declining since. Very spectacular performance and a fun bird to see, so I highly recommend that you do that. The peak is in April. By May, they're pretty much done. March, if there's snow on the ground, they don't even have the blinds open. So. Now, this is technically not a birding place. It's not outdoors, but I would be remiss if I did not mention the Lee Yawkey Woods and Art Museum in Wausau, because it is home to the world's greatest collection of bird art every year. This is a beautiful painting of one of the species of crane in the world. I don't know if it's a Siberian crane or what this is. And these are some bee eaters. Beautiful artwork every year. You can come and take in the exhibit. It's free, which is amazing. And it opens up the first Saturday following Labor Day every year, and it's open for several months. Although this year, due to the pandemic, it stayed open until February. This is a place where I personally met Roger Tory Peterson. I interviewed him as a journalist because the first day that it opens, they have a master's ceremony. They have an artist of the year, and then all the masters show up and you can actually meet them, get your book signed. I met David Allen Sibley here and had my guides signed with him. I also went birding with him that day. I had reserved time to do a story with him for our TV station, which did outdoor programming. So that was quite unique and singular. Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge is probably the littlest known of our wildlife refuges, but it's amazingly diverse and rich. And if you haven't been there, you're missing out, because this is a refuge that has it all. It's a wetland on the Mississippi, just off the Mississippi, north of La Crosse and across from Wabasha, Minnesota. You can see the lights of Wabasha, Minnesota across. But it also has tremendous grassland habitat. I was just there a week ago and had a close-up encounter with a short-eared owl. It was fantastic. Most of the place is inaccessible. Like a lot of our national wildlife refuges, it's not open to the public. If you look at area 9 and 13 and 14 and 10, that's about the extent of where you can drive into the park. But that's enough. There's a lot of diverse habitat. Birds like, again, grasshopper sparrows, Henslow's sparrows, orchard orioles, red-headed woodpeckers, rusty blackbirds in migration, white pelican, lots of canvasback ducks in migration. Great places, pheasants and great horn and barred owls. I had woodcock painting 6 of them as I stood waiting for the gate to open in the morning. Again, right off the Mississippi, so it's a great migratory corridor. Rex Meadows is the best place to bird. in the state of Wisconsin. If you ask me, and other people agree with me, I think, Creeks Meadows is a state wildlife area. It's not a national wildlife refuge. It's up near Grantsburg, Wisconsin, in Burnett County. It's really out there in the middle of nowhere. The nearest towns are Eau Claire, St. Croix Falls at a stretch, and then Superior to the north. It's a wetlands, and with ag country again around it, a large expanse of wetlands, but there's also forest and grassland here, and that makes it so diverse. What you have here is habitat that attracts every kind of bird, not only waterfowl, but songbirds in the forests, along with whippoorwill and owls, and then grassland birds, from bobolink to, again, grasshopper sparrows and brewer's blackbirds. It's famous for, oh, I actually have a CETA slide here. Sorry, that's my mistake. It's famous for trumpeter swans, redneck grebes, breeding redneck grebes, yellow rails. I once stood in a spot at sunset and had calling yellow rails. You know, they kind of go like you take two stones together, you go tick, 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 tick. I had performing sharp-tailed grouse, a great horned owl, and yellow rail all calling at the same time while I stood in one spot. It's a great spot in the state for sharp-tailed grouse too. Again, they're declining. They're not as common as they once were, but it's if you're going to see them anywhere, this is a spot besides Pershing Wildlife Area. They have lecontes and sharp-tailed sparrow, hard to find. And in the woods, a lot of breeding warblers that you won't get elsewhere, like northern parula. It's famous in the fall for its congregations of sandhill cranes. They come in by the thousands. So people travel there in October to see these masses of sandhill cranes that gather before they fly south. So a great place to drive around and see birds. I have had some experiences there where no matter when I show up, I'll see something odd to mockingbirds and lark bunting. So it's a fantastic place to be. Last of the 13, not least, is Wisconsin Point. Wisconsin Point is a city park outside of Superior. It's right on Lake Superior. There's a lighthouse at one end. It's a long spit of land with beach. And on one side, Lake Superior, on the other side, Aloes Bay. Looks like this from the air. But you can see this strip of land is a very attractive migratory corridor for birds that are heading north or south. They tend to bunch up here. There's the lighthouse. This is looking west. From the right corner, the right-hand bottom corner, there's a parking lot where people tend to gather and watch a lot of birds from the beach. And on a day when, if you get there early, especially in the fall, there is a lot of bird activity before people get in there and walk their dogs on the beach. In particular, what we in Wisconsin call Jagerfest. This is a traditional Wisconsin Society for Ornithology get-together. It's always held in the third week of September, even during the pandemic. And it's amazing. You'll see 30 to 40 scopes lined up on the beach. This is a fantastic time to go to Wisconsin Point because you have the expertise of the state of Wisconsin and of the region looking out for birds here. And it's named after the fact that it's a fantastic place to see Jaegers, mainly Pomeranian and parasitic, but sometimes longtail, as well as species of scoter, grebe, loons, all kinds of waterfowl. And in the woods, migrants, again, passerines. And so this is another spot that on a good day, if the conditions are right, you will see 90 species of birds in a day and 100 over a weekend. This is a jumping off point for Hawk Ridge, the best place to see hawks in Wisconsin. That's a joke. It's right across from Wisconsin Point, 20 minutes away in Duluth on the ridge there. And the best place to visit this is September 15th because they hold a traditional weekend where they sponsor visitors and they really put on a show. They sell brats and t-shirts and gifts at stands. They have hawk banders. They have naturalists on hand to answer your questions. You can sponsor a bird and release it by hand. But anytime in the fall is good, starting in the beginning of September all the way through November, depending on the bird. But in the middle of September is when the peak of broad-winged hawks and sharp-shinned hawks show up. I have been there on good days when the wind is out of the northwest for a few days, where you see 50,000 hawks, 50,000 individual hawks. Even on a bad day, you see 11 species of hawks when the wind isn't blowing right. So this is something I would highly recommend if you've never been there. One of the best hawk watching spots in the world, certainly here in our region. Lots of good places to see birds in the state. And again, I could go on and on. Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest is great for warblers. The Cook Arboretum, very near you, is another great spot for things like cerulean warblers, hooded warblers. Chequamegon Bay out of Ashland is another great lake access point that has tremendous birds in spring and fall. All of these spots are great places to see birds, and Wisconsin, of course, is a great place to live or visit. May it always be so. I'm Steve Betchkal, and I'm in love with birds. I want to remind you, I am an author. This is a website. You can pick up any of my books here if you're interested. I'll try to put this in the chat while we are done here, if anybody is interested in the link, so you don't have to copy it down. But I would be happy, if you have any questions, to do that now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We hope if you have a question and you haven't put it in the chat, now is the time. That was wonderful. I think some of us were packing our cars already to head up there. So that was really, really neat.
Good. Glad you enjoyed it.
We can open up the mics too if somebody's not typing in the chats, but let's see. I'm looking for. I know in September we were at that forest by Two Rivers and
Point Beach.
Yeah, that's a nice spot with the woods and the beach and
it is
fields near it.
Yeah, I love to camp there, and I've had an experience there. I call it birding in the bag. I count how many birds I can count from my bag and identify from my sleeping bag before I get out of it. I had 42 birds there one year.
Wow.
Which is the most I've ever had in a sleeping bag. And then I got to the point where I had to get up and go chase them. So.
Yeah, we were camping there when we in September, and everybody was spaced so far apart. It was a good COVID place to camp.
That's right.
So you either were so perfect in telling us about this that nobody has questions, but I
had a question. Several people in the chat were wondering, where is Cook Arboretum? You said that was maybe close to us.
It's right outside of Janesville. It's I didn't put in a few of the southerly spots because I thought they were less exotic for you guys, but it's a great spot. In fact, in Janesville, they now have Mississippi kites that have been showing up. So that's a fun spot to bird.
Okay.
But yeah, it's right outside, northwest side of Janesville. I'm adding the chat room link for the books.
Oh yeah, perfect. So when's your next trip? Where are you going?
I'm going to Big Bend National Park. I've got camping sites reserved for Earth Day week, and I intend to do some bird photography down there. I had it planned last year, same time, and they unilaterally refunded my camping reservations, of course, because COVID had just hit by a month, and I was not allowed to camp. I did spend a lot of time camping in the state of Wisconsin when the campgrounds opened up again in June, but I did not get to go to Big Bend, which is a place I actually worked when I was in my 20s. I worked at 3 national parks: Yellowstone, Glacier, and Big Bend.
That's cool. So I was going to ask you about something.
Here's a question: when you say a day, how many hours of birding do you spend? Well, we all know that the best part of birding is the early part, especially when you're talking about these times in before July. They stop singing, the birds stop singing. I'm a big locator by song person, and we know when we do a big day, usually you have, if you don't have 70, 80 species by 8 in the morning, you're not going to have that big day. So I start, I'm a breeding bird survey person. I do breeding bird surveys where you start at 4:45 in the morning. I'm not shy about getting up. I usually start what I call first birding light, which is a half an hour before sunrise. And I go until I run out of steam or the birds stop producing. So in a day, when I talk about Trempealeau, getting 100 at Trempealeau or Horicon or Buena Vista or places like that, I'm usually talking about being done by noon.
Hmm. That's cool. So.
Yeah, glad I asked. What a surprise.
How is the International Crane Foundation for a spot to visit? Wonderful. It's a great spot. And it's, of course, it's a fundraiser. It supports crane conservation. And you can walk around their property and see the species of crane in the world. I think there are, what, 15 species of crane in the world? Is that right? And they have representatives of all of them, including whooping. And so it's a wonderful place to go. Thompson Prairie, west of Madison. Yes, another good spot, another grassland spot. This is small. It's a little place, though. And so, you know, if you're talking about big places, Crex is a big grassland, or Buena Vista is a big grassland. Even Horicon has some bigger grasslands. But in the south, Thompson Prairie is unique because that part of the state has been plowed over. There aren't many prairies down there. And that's why that's so good. And yes, Cook is spelled C-O-O-K, Cook Arboretum. I don't have a website, but you can contact me if you have a question. I'm at stevebetchkal@gmail.com. Yes, and I see Cook. I'm just going down the line here and looking at some of the questions. So yes, Big Bend, Texas, Big Bend National Park on the Rio Grande is what I'm talking about down there. That's a great spot for Colima warblers, if you've never been there. It's the only spot in the US where you can regularly find Colima warblers. It's also a great spot for black-capped vireos, elf owls, a lot of great birds that are down there. And it's very near golden cheek warbler habitat, which I'm going to go to on the Edwards Plateau. If you've never seen a golden cheek warbler.
Hmm. Do you usually post on eBird?
I do, religiously. I believe in it. I think it's very important to do. So by sharing those birds, we're enabling bird science and bird conservation better than we ever have. By knowing where they are at any time of year, we are helping to understand the ranges of birds and where they do show up, and if they're with drawing from those edges of ranges. So I think it's very important. It's not only helpful too. I mean, face it, you can keep your whole list on eBird now. You don't have to do it. When I started, I was on pen and paper, as most of us will probably were. So you can have eBird do all your work now.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Another spot it's fun. It's just a little time here. Kenosha, right at the corner of the state, bordering on Illinois, is the Chewauquee Prairie. If you've never been there, that's a nice little habitat. And because it's right along the lake, you can walk right up to the state line. Because it's right along the lake and that far south, it's a good migratory corridor. I didn't include any of the Milwaukee spots. They're technically a little hard to get to. They're in the city and you have to maneuver your way around the roads in the city, which cannot be easy. And Racine has some good spots too. Racine's Harbor is also a nice place to bird, and the Wind Point area of Racine, where I grew up, is a great spot. And in the Madison area, I did not cover, but they have Pheasant Branch, which is a great park for warblers, and Nine Springs, which is a wetland habitat that's wonderful. So again, there are so many spots up here. Dunville Wildlife Area, which is in Menominee area, Dunn County, is wonderful. I didn't talk about Meade Wildlife Area and so many others. So Chewauquee borders the Spring Bluff. Is that the Illinois side?
That's a forest preserve on the Illinois
yeah.
side, yeah.
What bird has eluded you next on your wish list? I'm too short of 1,100 on my world list, but in the US here, I've never seen a buff-bellied sandpiper or a gerfalcon in Wisconsin, or a sharp-tailed sparrow. I've missed them at Crex. I've looked for them and never found them. So those three birds I'd really like to see in the state. But there are, of course, plenty of other birds. I've seen in the ABA area, I think now 653, because my son works in Denali National Park in Alaska, and we've been up there 5 times to visit him. So I've been to the Pribilof Islands, if you can believe that, and to Utqiagvik, which is Barrow, Alaska. And we have been all over the state into the Arctic Circle and Brooks Range hiking. So things like Arctic warblers and long-tailed yagers and lots of seabirds. Northern wheat ears. When's the best time to visit Big Bend? We were there in February being concerned about the heat. If we went too late, what birds would we see at that time? There are a lot of good winter birds, especially hawks. Hawks are really good in the winter in Big Bend. Peregrine falcons, Harris's hawks, a lot of birds like that spend the winter down there. And there are a lot of birds that winter, but it is not the best time. In fact, you have to wait till about the third week of April for the Kalima warblers and the black-capped vireos and those birds, which are migratory, to show up. And then you really get the action going. There's a lot of things like Scott's orioles are there all year, but they're not singing as strongly until spring. So February is early in Big Bend. February is a great time to visit the Rio Grande Valley farther to the east, out of Harlingen, Santa Ana, those kinds of places over to the coast, because that has a different population of birds, the green kingfishers and the green jays and brown jays and other birds that Audubon's oriole, which are around year round, and you'd want to see there. So I would go to the Rio Grande area of Harlingen and Santa Ana in the winter, November, December, January, February, even now, up until now, and I would say Big Bend for spring, when the cacti are blooming and you have more active hummingbirds and things like that. So, in fact, the third week of April is a great time to visit south from where we are. And whether you're talking about South Carolina, a lot of Florida activity. You're getting into my favorite national park in the US is Dry Tortugas. If you've ever been there, that's of course end of April and beginning of May. But if you're talking about California, you're talking about Arizona, then the third week of April is a great time to start thinking about visiting any of those southerly locales because of the migratory schedule. If you want to find, I see a question here about prairie chickens at Buena Vista. You just go into your browser and type in prairie chickens, UW Stevens Point. It'll come right up first thing, and there's a sign-up list. Now, they have not allowed it last year because of the virus, and this year, I don't think they've opened it up yet, and we're just about out of time. They're probably not going to open up this year, but it costs $10 to rent the blind for the morning. It's an amazing deal. I've had blinds to myself, so me and my camera are just sitting in the blind watching the birds, but sometimes they'll pack 4 people in there, and it's a very small blind. So there's not a lot of room to move around, but it's warmer when there are other people in there in a cold morning in April.
Okay, so any other questions that we can, why we have this expert on here who's obviously an expert everywhere too. I have a question. Are you working on a book right now?
I am a fiction writer and nonfiction writer, so I'm not technically working on any more bird books, but my books are on essays I published in magazines, newspaper, and so I travel and backpack and camp and write articles and essays about being out in the wild with birds. I was a photographer, a videographer for Lindblad National Geographic in the Galapagos in 2017. And like I said, worked in the national parks, but I get out a lot. I've been to 49 states. I only haven't been to Hawaii. And I've been to several countries, as many as I can in the Western Hemisphere. And then, so I'm very energetic about getting out and seeing birds that I can and then writing about them. And so Walk the Walk, Camp the Camp Bird the Bird is an example of one of the books listed on there. That is an essay, a collection of essays about being in Big Bend and being in Yellowstone and being in the Galapagos and being in the Pribilofs and what we as birders experience. And some stories are amazingly humorous because you really encounter amazing people and strange events. So.
Okay, so I would definitely be looking for those books. That sounds like a lot of fun to read. Also, so let's see. Somebody asked permission to access Google Docs, and that's for what? Nancy, you asked for to look at what was that on the Google Docs?
He gave us a website of Google Docs, the URL he sent us.
That doesn't take you directly to the site?
No, it's a Google Doc that we need access to. It's a spreadsheet.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, here, let me do this. I'm going to give you my direct address. I know you can get through to this. So if anybody is interested in a book, contact me there. I can mail it to you.
Okay, great, great. That's nice. Very good. So I suspect that you'll be going out even tomorrow morning somewhere.
Yeah, since the weather's so beautiful, it's a great time to get out. And it's a little, like I said, in between right now for migration. But the hawks will be coming in soon. I did see a winter wren the other day, which was nice. But hermit thrushes are due any day now, and that's the next bird on the list, as well as ruby-crowned kinglets and a few other little species that are short distance migrants. So
Very good.
mostly hawks now.
So any other questions before I close this up? But let's see, is there one more? Yep, you're getting the wonderful presentation and excellent guide to future trips. So I know everybody appreciated, and you know what, I really appreciate you taking your presentation and actually putting miles from here. So, I mean,
that does help, right?
it does. And
Good, yeah.
it
Yeah, you
says-
should know some of those are not close, and so you have to make an investment of time. By the way, I see a note here, the prairie chickens, the cost per person for viewing the prairie chickens is $50 to cover mileage and administrative fees for guiding. That is a different tour. The one I'm talking about is $10 is they walk you out to the blind. They in the morning before it gets light, you sit down and you're on your own. There's no guides. This is just being in a blind and watching the prairie chickens. That's a different kind of tour. They will give birding tours that cost more money. So this is different.
Okay. Let's see, what was that? Somebody, do you see hawks at dawn? Was that one? Yeah. Oh, that was, maybe you already talked about. No, I don't think so.
No, hawks usually are not very active at dawn. Usually have to wait till the thermals heat up a little later in the day, later in the morning, and then there's more activity. They're a lot easier to identify and spot when they're in the air than they're in the trees. And that's true of every single hawk. So it's makes a big difference. But that's one of the reasons that Hawk Ridge is so wonderful, is because they're all in the air above you, and there's so many to see, and there are experts pointing them out. You know, I've been there, and they say, "Look, there's a Swainson's hawk. Look, there's a goshawk. You know, there's a golden eagle. This is that one over there is a sharpshin. That one's a Cooper. Can you see the difference? You know." So all of those things are very helpful, and it's a great way to learn hawk identification, is to go to a place like Hawk Ridge. I've also been hawk watching in California at Golden Gate, and in the Keys, whole other experience there, and at Cape May and Hawk Mountain. And Hawk Ridge is as good as any of those places. It's a wonderful place to go bird hawk watching.
Well, very good, very good. Well, thank you again. It's a wonderful presentation. And
you're welcome, Glenn. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight.
We'd like to have you back sometime.
Sure.
Another
I do a wide variety of programs, especially on some of these places we talked about. So.
Okay.